Yeah, as the president of Philosophy Club and on behalf of members of the club, I want to thank you. Welcome to Philosophy Club, Hult, San Francisco, where we can inspire and to be inspired by others. First, I want to thank Professor Olaf to accept our invitation and to be with us to inspire us today. And I want to thank all of you for attending our meeting. Who is Olaf? Olaf is a professor faculty, a member of USC Berkeley Haas School of Business, and professor of practice in global strategy, innovation, and economics, digital and disruption future at Hult International Business School. He has 25 years of experience as an executive and advisor in innovation and tech focused in multinationals, startups, and consulting. He is the founder and CEO of Combrain Future and Combrain Design. He is a member of the Global Expert Network for the Fourth Industrial Revolution at the World Economic Forum. He is co-author of Solomon Code, Humanity in a World of Thinking. These books, I think you can see it. I recommend to buy these books and read it. After the books, I was so inspired, and I say I have to have our Professor Olaf in our philosophy club. So I will give the word to Tom to explain us how we will manage the process of the questions. Tom?
Thank you, Mohsen, and welcome, Professor Groth. Great to have you. So we're very excited about this event, and we would like to make it as participatory as possible. Mohsen will be asking Professor Groth a series of questions to get the conversation rolling, but we would like to involve you in the conversation as well. So there will be opportunities to ask questions throughout. What we'll ask you to do for now is when you do have a question, you can use the reaction button at the bottom of the screen to raise your hand, and we'll call on you at the next available opportunity. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Tom. So we will start with our first question. So as Descartes said, I think, therefore I am. So artificial intelligence can think and can do better and faster than human. So there is no difference between artificial intelligence and human. So is the definitions of what's the definitions of artificial intelligence to start?
Well, thank you very much, Mohsen and Tom and everybody who has been participating in getting this organized and hosting it. Let me just first say, if I may, before I answer your question, Mohsen, that I am super glad that all of you do have a philosophy club going on at Hult. Hult is my main professional home as a full global professor of strategy and innovation and economics. I have long felt very strongly about the nexus between the ability to think and act responsibly as business leaders and the more technical aspects of business and of course of solution engineering. And I'm very glad that Hult has taken to the ESG, environmental, social, governance challenges of the ethics realm so concertedly, and that you have picked this up here when it comes to artificial intelligence. So thank you for that. So first of all, the definition of artificial intelligence is the automation of cognitive processes. Cognitive processes are those processes that happen in our head that have to do with taking in and processing information, and then making predictions, recognizing patterns, or making decisions, okay? This is what we have always held to be a very innately human process, because we have always thought that we are the beings on this earth, if not in the universe, as arrogant as that may sound, that have the highest thinking, cognating capability there is. Artificial intelligence automates some of these processes, okay? That is why we believe it is so relevant to us, why it has so much potential, but also why it instills so much fear, right? And frankly, also overgeneralization. The idea that artificial intelligence can do some things that we do with our heads very well, and maybe better, less prone to error, and maybe even more efficiently, so more effectively and more efficiently, of course, does not mean that there's no difference between artificial intelligence and innately natural human intelligence. Okay, artificial intelligence today is a very narrow type of intelligence. Artificial intelligence today can help recognize your face. It can help analyze the patterns of your movement throughout the day, and it can utter some predictions about your movements tomorrow based on your identity and some pattern recognition in your movements, maybe more accurately and more precisely than humans can. But that is under very, very strict, narrow regiment of parameters where the target function of what it tries to solve for is always very clear. The data set that it gets is or will be structured very clearly. And it needs a lot of learning, a lot of data about you and about everybody on this call to figure out, what does a human face look like? What do you look like when you move throughout the day? And then it can discern some patterns. By contrast, the human being can actually learn very quickly with very little data. So, a child understands fairly quickly, even if it cannot speak very well, when it drops a cup full of milk on the floor, or when, it sees an apple fall from a tree. It understands certain cause and effect relationships. It understands that the apple is falling from the tree. The tree is not moving up from where the apple is. That seems trivial to all of us here on this call because we're human, but the AI does not have human history, does not have 2.5 million years of human evolution. So it actually doesn't know that the tree is not moving up. The apple is staying the same, okay, whereas we do. So something as trivial, it needs to be told, right? So this ability to learn contextually and to learn what we call heuristically, right, making sense of the world around you is still very much human. And so it's not true that human intelligence and machine intelligence today are the same, but they could be at some point in the future.
Now, our second question, it will be the development of full artificial intelligence could spell the end of the humanity race. Stephen Hawking warns. Elon Musk fears that the development of artificial intelligence may be the biggest existential threat humanity faces. So what do you think about this?
Well, so as I just explained, we have narrow intelligence today, right? And that can be tremendously helpful doing some things better than we can. Then we have the next step, which is general artificial intelligence, or GAI. And here it's about stringing different narrow intelligences together so that an AI can, understand, the likelihood of an apple dropping based on its ripeness and color, okay, as well as predict where you are going tomorrow, as well as keep an autonomous vehicle from having an accident, right? As you can tell, these are three very distinct tasks. And at some point, we might have an artificial intelligence that can learn more generally and fulfill various functions. That still doesn't mean that it is smarter than we are. It just means it is now going from, being an embryo of intelligence to being a small toddler of intelligence, okay? Then there is the kind of super artificial intelligence, or super AI, and that's what Elon Musk has been talking about, and various other people like Stephen Hawking, where we are saying, look, given enough data, given a bit more time, once an AI can figure out how to learn heuristically and how to learn contextually, then it's just a matter of time until it figures out that in order to optimize certain functions, like let's say our environmental well-being, okay, or certain production processes, it will probably figure out that at some point we as humans seem rather inefficient, right? See, we are wonderful beings in that we are very creative and we are very unique, each one of us, okay? And we are also very complex. We are emotional. That's part of what makes us unique. And we are very hard to optimize, okay? I mean, when you all work together in Hult teams, teammates don't tick like machines, right? They have lives, they have idiosyncrasies and emotions and cultural makeup and, all that stuff that makes us so unique. Well, machines don't. And if it was just about optimizing processes, humans are probably not the most efficient machine to be engineered. Although you could argue the human brain runs on, I don't know, something like 4 watts, is super efficient, okay? But it isn't super fast. The human brain, compared to some of our machine brethren that are now emerging, is actually fairly slow, right? So at some point, a higher intelligence will figure out that if it wants to optimize certain things, we may be in the way, okay? And this is where people like Stuart Russell at UC Berkeley's Center for Human Compatible AI and many others who signed the Asilomar principles, like Elon Musk, are saying, we need to have safeguards in place for the day when this could become the reality. But when you talk to AI scientists, and I would advise all of us who are business majors to please regularly talk to scientists because they know what's really going on today. Whereas, some in the media and some in business cycles that would like to see all this really cool stuff happening, frankly, may be missing some key points. So those scientists that know what's reality today or where science and engineering could take us in the next 10 years will tell you it's likely going to take at least 50 to 70 years for us to get to some kind of super intelligence, if ever, okay? So in the meantime, I think we need to make sure that we put safeguards in place and do that in a timely manner, which, Stuart Russell and others are doing by working with the United Nations, by designing approaches to artificial intelligence that have kill switches in them, right? That have functions in them that say, whenever you're about to make a decision that goes against the health and well-being of a human being, don't switch off, okay? Those are all good things. And there are also other issues in AI today that if we just have this Terminator vision of, 2090, okay, then we will ignore the near-term issues that could be much more dangerous. And that's a whole lot of ethics considerations.
Yeah, indeed. Tom, you have some questions?
Yeah, we actually do have our first question from the audience. Chrissy, go ahead, please.
I'm very curious in regards of artificial intelligence is something very, very good. I mean, I definitely agree with that. How can you relate that to sustainable business development? This is a topic which is very interesting for me. And I know it can be done so much, especially in countries like Africa, which are so behind with development and something. What's certain cases, or how can you relate artificial intelligence into sustainable business development?
Yeah, so artificial intelligence is good at taking multiple data streams and making sense of an overarching picture. Okay, I'll give you a good example. So the DARPA, the long-term R&D branch of the U.S. Defense Department, has been designing interrelated AI models that can figure out when the next food crisis might occur in a given area around the world, okay? It can do that by analyzing soil conditions, weather conditions, market pricing, infrastructure conditions, transport movements, all of it very complex in and of itself, meshing that picture and making some predictions about food crises. And that's very helpful because we don't want the fallout of a food crisis, okay? So equally, AI can, in theory, help us optimize our resource use in business so that we can minimize our carbon footprint, for instance, okay, or our eco footprint if you want it to be a bit broader with regard to air and water resources and other natural resources, okay? And so in theory, it can do that, meaning we can design models that can help with that. But there is always the interaction of AI, the algorithms, right? AI are really just algorithmic models, okay? And then there is data science, and that handles the data that you need to feed into the models, okay? And of course, all of it is driven by the engine, and that is computing power or compute power. So the complexer these models get, the more compute power we need, okay? And so currently, we are, we have benefited from advances in computing technology, but and we're now going down to 7 and 3 nanometer technologies on wafers for processors, but the end of Moore's law, right, of getting ever more compute power out of ever smaller transistors is coming to an end, okay? And so the question is, if we really want to figure out these very wickedly complex sustainability questions, we have to get to the next level of computing power on the basis of which, on top of which AI can run, okay? So it's not enough to have AI, you have to have the machines as well, okay? And that's where quantum computing comes in. So because that can compute new types of calculations much faster, okay, than any regular computer. So if you have that and AI and you have the data, right, clean data that's not corrupt, then we will be able to run optimization problems through those models, and that will help us become much more sustainable. Yeah. So that's the high level answer.
Yeah, in the same context, when we talk about the quantum computer, we talk about security. What we heard that with quantum computer, there will not be security. It will be a big problem of security. So, what do you think about the problem of security and cyber attack when we talk about artificial intelligence?
Yeah, so look, we interviewed cybersecurity experts for the book, as you know, and I just designed a new course on the future of technology, which has a big cybersecurity module in it. And experts are telling us that with artificial intelligence in the picture, the arms race between black hat hackers, right, which is the word for badly intentioned hackers, versus white hat hackers, right? Those are hackers that help companies patch up their networks, okay? Because they can figure out where the gaps are. The arms race between the black hat and the white hat hackers, okay? The arms race just got turbocharged because of artificial intelligence. And so we are dealing with a much more heightened threat potential now, because now, of course, black hat hackers can use artificial intelligence to figure out patterns, okay? And we are using AI to shore up our firewall. There are two ways to beat the black hat hackers to make sure that we win, okay? The first one is, as we deal with quantum computing, quantum-based encryption is very hard to hack, because even just looking at a quantum key changes the key's configuration, and it happens so fast that it's almost impossible to put the quantum key back so that nobody knows you were there. Okay, and so that's number one. Number two, we have to use AI to analyze not just somebody coming in from the outside into my firewall, right? Who are they? And make sure that they stay out, because hackers eventually will succeed, okay? We have to also figure out how to use AI on the inside of a company to figure out who is authorized to do what. So has somebody intruded and they're behaving in a certain way that is really not right, that doesn't comply with the usual pattern, okay? And then you identify those and you kick them back out, okay? It's called zero trust, and it means that everybody, including employees in a company, are subject to AI surveillance to understand whether you are doing things you're authorized to do. You have access to data that you are authorized to access, okay? And the moment you don't, it shuts down and it kicks you out, okay? So that's called zero trust, and artificial intelligence will be part of that.
So interesting. As the first time I heard that. And the second, the main question when you talk about artificial intelligence is privacy, of course. Social media and the super algorithms, we are talking that Amazon and Google, they know us better than what we know ourselves. So what do you think about it?
Yeah, so look, what that means is, I'll tell you what it means, and then I'll give you the interpretation of what we do about it. So what this means is, when you place an Amazon order, you of course have a history of transacting with Amazon, right? So you in and of itself are fairly well known in terms of your purchase behaviors, whether it's books or movies or consumables, okay? So that over the years presents a fairly holistic picture of where you are, how old you are, what your ethnic makeup is, how you relate to others, and all those types of things, okay? It can even determine what your sexuality is, and maybe even better than because here's what the interesting thing that happens. It can take your profile and compare it to hundreds of millions of other profiles, and then it can correlate these profiles, okay? So theoretically, Amazon could determine a very granular, very privacy invading profile of you and draw some conclusions about you that you may not want to hear, okay? Or that you definitely don't want other people to hear, right? Because it's private, yeah? Now, Amazon has no incentive to do that, because all they want to do is sell you more stuff, not scare you or offend you, okay? And, if you go back through the history of abuses of AI, Amazon is not one of the main culprits, right? So arguably, they have so far, been pretty good, AI citizens, as it were, okay? You may have a problem with Amazon on labor rights or whatever it may be, or on carbon footprint or whatever, but on AI, it has not yet gone too far. And that's because they have an interest in playing very nicely with the consumer. They want to enrich your life and make money off that and not scare you, okay? But of course, if you go to companies like Facebook that are known for selling your data and who you are essentially made up of glass. And they will sell everything there is to know about you to somebody who can make money with it, okay? And that's the advertising-based model. Data will get shared with data brokers, okay? And they might use it to sell it to product companies or to political parties or influencers of whatever kind, okay? So privacy is fast becoming a major issue. 700 million plus Europeans and North Americans feel very strongly about privacy. Whenever they say Americans don't care about privacy, that is simply not true. Americans are just not as used to having their privacy protected. And in general, people are scared. They don't know what to do, right? Under GDPR, you can actually get all your data back from somebody, but you're scared. First of all, you don't know how to do that. Even when you know how to do that, it takes time. You got to know what you're doing. You might be afraid to screw it up, okay? You might be afraid that somebody will stop giving you services, right? And I can understand why, because if you don't give data, they're going to have to charge you. And if they can't charge you, then they may not be able to offer you services. So it's a catch-22, and it's what they call the privacy paradox, Okay, so we need personalized privacy assurance solutions. And incidentally, the think tank that I lead has a design arm, and I've hired a Hult executive MBA, and we're working with Hult business analytics students to design products that can help with that. So it's an issue very near and dear to my heart.
And the next question is Yuval Harari in his books 21 Lessons for the 21st Century said, just as the Industrial Revolution created the working class, automation could create a global useless class. Mr. Harari said, and the political and social history of the coming decade will revolve around the hopes and the fear of this new class, useless class. So what do you think about it?
Well, let me answer that question, Mohsin, but let me also, if I may, add one more sentence that's really important, especially for business majors like us here at Hult, okay? When we talk about privacy, why do we care? We care because we're responsible business leaders, yes. We want to be good people, good citizens, and that means being empathetic with our fellow humans, okay? After all, business is creating things that are supposed to make lives better, not worse, okay? Yes, and there's also an economic reason to really pay attention to privacy, okay? Look, privacy, designing solutions with a customer in mind means you have to create intimacy, or you want to understand the customer to design better solutions, right? And the better solution, the more value it adds, the more money they give you back, okay? So there's a trust relationship that you want. You want the intimacy, but you can't have the intimacy if they don't trust you. Trust is the most important currency in the economy. Once it's lost, you're really messed up as a business person, okay? And so that's also why we need to care and why we should be putting privacy respect into our business models. And incidentally, I teach a course at Hult on Big Think AI that teaches people how to do that. And it can be done. There's a $3 trillion data economy out there that we should harvest. And that's the next frontier of the digital economy. If we're respectful and responsible, we can harness that. Okay, so now on to Mr. Harari. So Yuval Harari is a brilliant writer, a phenomenal historian, a storyteller like none other, and I greatly enjoy his books, and they teach us a lot of things. I do feel that in his book Homo Deus, he is too dark, and I think some of that has to do with an oversimplification of how economics works and how industrial revolutions have worked. And that doesn't mean there is no negative aspect. Believe me, I'm a cautious optimist, but I do see the potential for massive fallout. But there is a difference between saying we're going to have a problem putting 300, 400 million people through our education systems because we don't have the capacity in any country of the world to do that, to retrain them and reskill them, okay? That's bad, okay? But there's a difference between that and saying, we're going to create this class of people that are all going to be sitting on the sidelines, and then, you know, we're going to have to feed them, and maybe they become fat and happy and they just play games on the couch and take drugs. Okay, that's, frankly, to me, that's an oversimplification, because over time, even when we've had bad fallout from an industrial revolution, we have created new jobs. We have been able to put people into new types of employment. And I'm confident that we can do that here as well. The question is, how long is the adjustment period? Okay, so I'm confident we'll get there, but if it's 5 years, that's okay. If it's 10 years, yeah, it's getting kind of dicey. If it's 20 years, we're going to see massive social conflict, social displacement, poverty, inequality, and that means probably armed conflict as well, because you know, the masses that are out of jobs or that have to work 3 jobs to feed their families, they're going to get really unhappy, and rightly so, okay? Because we as the technology elites, that's us right here, probably most of us on this call that are getting MBAs and PhDs, you know, we are the primary beneficiaries of artificial intelligence and automation. And as leaders, we need to be responsible to bring others along on that journey. And if we don't, we probably ought to be punished. Okay. We want to avoid that. Okay. And I think we have the next 5 to 10 years to figure this out at scale. And it's a massively complex challenge, but we'll get there. I'm confident. That was does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense, but the problem is the people that said that is like the number of jobs created by artificial intelligence is like smaller than the number that the job will destroyed by artificial intelligence. I mean, like we talk about like 30%. For example, in Facebook, there is a lot of work destroyed by artificial intelligence. So what do you think about it? I mean, the percentage is different.
Yeah, look, different economists have done different math, and nobody has come out with a definitive conclusion. But I will tell you that I like the McKinsey numbers the best, and the McKinsey studies the best. There are some people, you might have read about the, I believe it was the Oxford study that said, by 2050, whatever it was, 80% of all jobs are going to be deleted, okay, which was a vast oversimplification. And economists, including the people who authored the study, have since recognized that a job is the wrong unit of analysis, okay? Because any job has both routine and non-routine elements. And it actually turns out that the non-routine tasks vastly outweigh the routine tasks in most humans' lives, including that of machine operators, okay? Now, still, there are some classes of jobs that are going to have a greater percentage of routine tasks and some that have smaller percentages, okay? And so the question is, what do we do with the people who have a greater percentage? So McKinsey has figured out that something like 60% of all job categories will have approximately 30% task automation, okay? So, all of us here are, I guess in pure statistics terms, reasonably likely to have something like a third of our jobs disrupted. And then the question is, how do we backfill it? So all of us, and I agree with you, Mohsin, we need to be vigilant and we need to have a sense of urgency, okay, to figure out, hey, my old job before I came into business school, how big a percentage do I think I had that was rather routine, okay? And then just use that as a benchmark. You might be off by some percentage points, but the key is not whether it's 25 or 35%. The key is to figure out how would I backfill that percentage if it was up to me, okay, with something that is higher value. And you could, of course, say there's good news here because, look, I mean, who doesn't, are you going to have a problem telling me which 30% you don't want to be doing anymore? For most people, there's a high correlation of job dissatisfaction with routine tasks, okay? Like truly repetitive, templated routine tasks. So who doesn't want to give that up and backfill it with the stuff that may be more creative, more satisfying, more people-focused, emotional intelligence, social intelligence related, right? It doesn't mean everybody is very good at those things, but they usually, once you do these things, a bit more satisfying, right? So we have to ask ourselves that. And look, as a professor, I have to ask myself that too. And for me, that is in coaching, in mentoring, and guiding, the stuff that a machine can't do, right? I mean, when you talk to me about your career and your life, okay, I can take all this different data into account and I can relate it to my human experience, maybe to people I know, and there may be some subjectivity in it, but a machine cannot do that, okay? That interpersonal relation, because you and I, 2.5 million years ago, crawled out of a primordial slime together, okay? We have a shared human existence and machines can't, okay? And so that's part of the answer. So I would say pay attention to the 30% of your job and figure out in a timely manner, what do I have to learn? And there's two recommendations I have. One is make sure you understand these new technologies, whether it's AI, data science, quantum computing, brain-computer interfaces, or automation. You have to know how machines make decisions, how they function, how, whether what they do is right, and how you relate to that. Okay, so that's number one, get the technical skills, but then also get the human skills to integrate with the machine and differentiate from the machine. There's no use in competing with the machine. You will lose every single time. If you compete just on efficiency, you cannot calculate that NPV fast enough. You cannot beat the machine, okay? You just can't. My friend who is a chess grandmaster said, the era where the brightest chess grandmaster in the world can beat a chess computer is over once and for all. It will never come back, okay? So you better figure out other ways to play. And that is in the symbiosis between the machine and the human, right? You bring what you're good at, the machine brings what it is good at. And in chess, for instance, Patrick said in the stories in the book, when I pair a supercomputer with a human chess grandmaster, they play chess on a whole nother level up here that he had never seen before, because the chess computer can open up a whole world of opportunity of combinations of moves. Combine that with the human visioning capability and strategy capability, and you've got a deadly mix. That's the mindset we need to have about all these jobs. Okay. And I think that's the future, but it's a challenge. How do we put that many people through that training?
If I may, I believe Pablo has a question. Pablo,
yes.
Please.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you, Olaf, for being here. It's been amazing, and I love the subject. But yeah, I heard you talking about the United Nations, and you tackled my question like right there. But it's difficult to even say. But I am worried of this subject, of this topic. Because we want it or not, we have to accept that artificial intelligence was created for reducing costs, getting more profits, targeting better consumers. It is a capitalist move. It is, as you said, me that I have an MBA or a PhD, or I do have the advantage, and I do have the advantage because I have the income. There is a difficult way to distribute income, and we're having a big problem worldwide, not in Mexico, not in the United States, not in Latin America, the whole world. The income is really bad distributed. And I think artificial intelligence is doing the same thing with information. And I'm sorry, information is privacy, information is power, and information is a lot of things. So yes, I am a bit worried about what humanity does with its capabilities, because it's amazing. It is amazing. And I'm really eager to learn more. But I am worried because, yeah, inevitably who manage that information or who know how to control that information, yeah, first is me and then is the others. And that way of thinking, I don't think it's going to take us to a better world or to a social welfare. But probably this is not as a question. This is I'm begging you to calm me down. I want to hear you that probably artificial intelligence is in the correct hands, and yeah, and that humanity is going to be responsible for each other,
Yeah. So let me, Pablo, let me rile you up a little bit more, and then I'll calm you down. Okay.
Yeah. Thank you.
So the first thing is, I don't want to be misunderstood. You and I are not safe. You and I will benefit more disproportionately from cognitive technologies because the elite that makes decisions for technology, that deploys technology, that has the capital to invest in technology, always does better than everybody else who just uses technology. Okay,
I agree.
so let's be very clear about that. So, so now that said, the countervailing trend here is that artificial intelligence is automation of white-collar jobs, not blue-collar jobs. Okay, so it's now, and this is why it's getting so much attention, it's now hitting white-collar people who were formerly the elite. You know, it's much harder for a robot to have the manual dexterity that a human being does in a developing country where, I don't know, you make shoes or you handle, you know, sensitive equipment or whatever it may be. Okay. That doesn't mean automation isn't coming for those jobs as well, but it's slower because it requires smart robotics, and they're even more expensive than artificial intelligence, where you can just press a button and the code goes, you know, 100 million times around the world. Okay. So a very different type of automation. So you and I are at risk of this. And to calm you down, luckily we now have a lot of people around the world that are saying we need governance to shape this. Okay. There is I can't remember if it was Mark Andreessen, you know, famous venture capitalist in Silicon Valley, but you can probably look up the quote online, you know, who said, you know, we wanted flying cars, or we wanted autonomous cars, and we got 160 characters. Okay. Meaning, you know, we have all these grand aspirations about making life better, and what we get is Twitter. Okay. Yes. I mean, let that sink in, right? I mean, I like Twitter. I'm on Twitter. I actually think it's a great news service. Okay. But, you know, is that the best we could do with our innovation talent is Twitter, you know, or Facebook? I mean, you know, how about we solve world hunger, right? Hult Prize, right? Or how about we give better education? You know, we're still teaching like it's like 100 years ago, Industrial Revolution, right? Like 60 people in a classroom, okay? Or, you know, take us to Mars, or, you know, solar energy, or, you know, saving in the United States 40,000 people dead every year from traffic accidents that are human error, okay? And instead, we put our money, you know, into developing code on Twitter. Okay. I mean, you can't tell me that's the highest use of our human ingenuity. Okay. But increasingly, you know, the policy and business elites and scientists are realizing we have to, now that we're getting into the brain, we have to become a lot more cognizant of where we invest, how we invest, and how we govern those investments. You know, you probably heard the term techlash, right? There has been a backlash against technology companies. Yeah. And, you know, look, I mean, I'm a techie, but I have to tell you, I kind of applaud that backlash because, you know, we're going to have to become a lot better at using technology for the betterment of humankind, and not just for selling, you know, better eye candy. Okay. Yeah. And so, but luckily, a lot of people are getting behind this, not just the Asilomar community there, the Asilomar Principles, Future of Life Institute, but also the United Nations, the OECD, you know, the European Commission, the Americans are now getting behind this. You know, even in China, the Chinese government has realized that, you know, it can't let companies run roughshod over citizens. Now, you could argue, well, then maybe the government shouldn't do that either. Okay. So that's a whole nother conversation. But I think there is now a momentum on the part of not just activists, but on the part of government and business leaders that say, if we want, remember that trust I told you about? Yeah. You know, an abused customer is never a good customer that wants to come back. Right. So I am hopeful, and there's early indicators that we will get governance in place. The World Economic Forum, where I have an affiliation, you know, albeit a casual one, is very strong into this now. So watch this space. I think you'll find that there's a lot of good people now that are coming up with great solutions. And again, it's one of the things I teach at Hult as well.
Okay, thank you, you, Olaf.
Yeah, I want just to stay in the same context of the international order. In K40, in his books, II Superpower said that China in 10 years will be AI superpower. So as you know, when we talk about West and China, we have different way to see the world. So there is a danger that Chinese will be the superpower in artificial intelligence.
So first of all, I believe China already is an AI superpower. Okay, the two leading countries in the world in AI are the United States and then China. Okay, number one, number two. Europe is a very distant number three. Okay, lots of good scientists, lots of entrepreneurial talent, but very little capacity for scaling out solutions that carry with it this, third model of being individual rights respecting. Okay. And then there is everybody else. Okay. And there are some real hotspots like Israel, Singapore, Finland, South Korea. Okay. Canada. But none of them big enough, even together, not big enough to rival the two superpowers, US and China. Okay. So now, let's dispel with this term superpower, because it sort of connotes, Cold War 2.0, okay, arms race between two, okay, because we do have the advantage now, contrary to nuclear power, which is very expensive and tough to distribute globally. Okay, that's why there were only a dozen or 2 dozen nuclear powers around the world. Here we have a diffusion of artificial intelligence capability that is larger, not fully democratized, but larger. Okay, so it's not quite the same bipolar thing, right? Also, China is a superpower, but it doesn't yet have the same capabilities that the United States does. And when you look at the metrics like we have, if you go to our website at Cambrian.ai, you'll find a study on national AI strategies, and you'll find that that China still doesn't have the number of AI startups. I think the United States has double. Okay, and that's an absolute term. That's not even per capita. Okay, in per capita terms, we're even better than that. Number two is the H index of papers published. It's true that the Chinese are publishing more papers, but many of those are written with Western scholars as partners. Okay. And they're not cited as often as American papers are. Okay, the number of professors and faculty in AI vastly more in the United States than anywhere around the world. Okay, and then you have the idea of patents, where it's true the Chinese are issuing more patents than the United States in AI, but most of those patents are not globally defensible. Now, that one you can argue, does it really matter if it's a market of 1.4 billion that they cannot take their patents abroad? Because if you've got 1.4 billion, why would you need to go abroad? Okay, so we can have that conversation. So the Chinese aren't quite there yet. The university establishment does not yet, and this is where I disagree with Kai-Fu, who introduced his book alongside mine in San Jose 3 years ago. And he's a wonderful man. I hold him in very high regard, and we had a wonderful lunch afterwards. But I disagree with him when he says, China doesn't need breakthrough science, we just have data, okay? Because at some point, remember when we go back to heuristic learning, contextual awareness, perceptive computing, these are all breakthrough innovations that come out of the United States or European establishments. And I'm not saying China can't get there. I think the Chinese are have incredible ingenuity. It just hasn't happened yet. And I don't see it happen over the next 5 years, but it could happen over 10 or 15 years. Okay. I do think that's important. I do believe that European and American science establishments, and by extension, the Israelis as well, okay, or the Canadians, they allow cross-fertilization. So the next breakthrough in AI may not come from computer science. It may come from neuroscience, or it might come from computational biology. We don't know. And so that kind of breakthrough science on the intersections of fields, to me, is where the greatest potential is for the next breakthrough in groundbreaking new AI and computing, innovations. So that does matter. And that's one point where I don't disagree with him. Now that said, don't agree with him. Now that said, I think having massive amounts of data will be very useful, even though we have some techniques coming up with one-stop shopping on data where we may not need a massive amount of data to train models. At the moment, data is still a big advantage. And the Chinese, on the consumer side, they lead. On the enterprise side, America still has more data.
Yeah, to stay in the same context as well, because Kofi, he talks about that offline and online. He said that United States, they have a lot of information about online, but Chinese, they have online and offline, because with chat and with Alipay, they have I think more than triple information about offline than online. And my next question, it will be about, you talked about neuroscience. So now we are talking about transhuman. Is that a human, we can use artificial intelligence to empower human in the brain or to empower human. So what do you think about transhuman?
So I think on transhumanism, this is an age-old idea that I think it's interesting because, as is appropriate for this club, it's highly philosophical, right? De facto, and I always think that, business is the most effective way, and often, not always, the most efficient way of ringing in big change. Okay. Hult students always bring that fire. Okay. But in order to do that well, you have to think very carefully about what you're doing. And so philosophy is really important. Stepping outside of philosophy, though, you have to ask yourself, what path are we on? And the reality is, of course, that we're already on this path of merging with machines. Okay, I mean, if you're wearing glasses or you have contact lenses, that's human augmentation. It may not feel like that to you because you can take the glasses off. Okay, but as soon as you put something on your body and it cannot be removed, right? So think about the border being contact lenses or a hearing aid. Without suffering significant human performance lags, okay? At that point, you could say, well, we're already augmenting our skills. You remember Luke Pistorius, the South African runner who has 2 titanium legs, okay? The guy who killed his girlfriend a number of years ago, right? He can run as fast, if not faster than most humans on Earth with 2 artificial legs. That's human augmentation, okay? So you could argue, and doesn't even include pacemakers, okay, or the new MEMS technology that puts little robots into your bloodstream. We are already on the path of merging automated machines with human beings inside our body, okay? And some people will tell you that the next era of dramatic change is what we have called inside out, meaning you use technology to get into the body and then bring stuff back out. Okay. And that is scary to many people, but we're already doing that now, and we're on that path now. Does that mean we're going to lose our human essence and our soul, whatever that is? This is where it gets really philosophical, right? And when you listen to my friend David Chalmers, who is a philosopher at NYU, he sometimes comes to my courses. He says, well, we can't even agree on what is consciousness. Do we even have a consciousness? Well, I mean, no, the philosophers can't agree, right? Some philosophers say we have 100 billion neurons in our heads. When they fire at each other, there is an emerging property that cannot be reduced back to the 100 billion neurons, and that's what we call consciousness. And then there's others that say, when you have 100 billion of anything, you add all that up, that looks like a consciousness, but it's really just the sum of its parts. And if that's the case, then we are just biological machines, right? I mean, we have wetware, we have molecules, But how is that different from a molecule that's a metal, right? One is organic, the other is inorganic. But so what that goes to say is we will not have certainty on. I think we as human beings, like any other species, needs to see that we survive and we stay healthy. And so we need to safeguard who we think we want to be. Okay. And where that border is, that's for the, scholar practitioners, the philosopher business people to figure out, right? Not easy, but that's your calling.
Tom, you have a question?
Yeah, actually, Professor Olaf, I'd like to ask you to go a little bit further with that, because as humans start to be able to interface organically with machines, if you'll pardon the pun, it seems very likely to me that the ethical dilemma that presents will lead to two camps, basically those who accept it and go for it, and those who are fundamentally opposed to it on whatever basis. It also seems to me that the advantage, assuming no unforeseen externalities, the advantage to the individuals who do choose to integrate with machines directly will be absolutely insurmountable compared to those of us who want to stay, these mundane, boring beings that we already are. And I can just begin to speculate on how that might affect the economy and business, society at large, et cetera. Would you perhaps comment on that, please?
Well, so yeah, I see even more bifurcations there, to be honest, Tom, right? I mean, there's the bifurcation, the rift between those who want to and those who don't want to, right? And we probably all have friends who say, yeah, I'm up for it. And then there's others who say, no way, Jose, okay, not going to happen, okay? But then the other dividing line is between those that have financial means and can afford it and those that don't. And think about it, we're talking about the 1% of the world dominating the rest already, right? So the 99% cannot afford it. Well, even if it's only like 50% who can't afford it, that's another dividing line then between those who have money and can afford it and have power and can enhance themselves and those that can't, okay? So there's probably multiple fractures in society between the philosophical differences and the financial ones as well, right? So how do you draw the line? Like, think about brain enhancements, okay? I mean, it's easy to say, look, if you have a soldier who caught a bullet in the head in the war and needs brain restoration or brain enhancement, we will probably all readily agree, for the sake of him or her having a better life, we will probably agree to sponsor him on that, okay? Or somebody in a car accident, okay? Whereas, now imagine there's somebody with a measurably low IQ. They were just born with a lack of, intellectual analytical skills, okay? Or capabilities. They may have fantastic skills otherwise. I don't know, maybe empathy, or maybe it's got to do with how they use their body or whatever it may be, okay? So there's somebody with a really low IQ. Do you allow them to get a brain enhancement? Where do you draw the line, right? And there's a societal consensus that needs to be had that people will argue over with, violent disagreements, okay? Because it touches on, well, isn't that how nature made us? And shouldn't we all accept it and accept us all as different, there's also, and I think I mentioned this to you in one of the open houses that I just attended with some of you, there's the Japanese concept of wabi-sabi, right? Which is slight imperfections in things that you make, like when you mold when you take a piece of clay and you mold a nice pot, and the pot, you put it in the oven and it comes back out and it has a little rip in it, right? They think that that's actually beautiful, little imperfections. You can find that in nature too, right? So do we value that? And then, somebody who is maybe not perfectly super intelligent, that's just, that's just an imperfection. But what is perfect anyway? Right? So yes, I agree with you that there is a lot to be discussed here, and ethicists will have a field day with this. You know, and I think you'll see a lot of dispute around that in the coming decade. And there's no telling which way it's going to go. I will tell you, you cannot completely kill the trend. There is no technology in human history that we have ever completely stopped, ever. Not one. You know, not nuclear technology, right? The Germans are swearing off of it. They're importing dirty coal or gas from Russia. Okay. You know, the Swedes went off of it and went back on. You know, look at Japan and Fukushima, and the Japanese are launching their nuclear power plants again. You know, look at World War I, World War II, just to tell you some of the more technology intensive wars, you know, tens of millions of people dead. Did we ever say we're not going to make tanks again? No, we're making better tanks.
Yeah.
Now, we have found regulations and governance mechanisms to shape these things. Now we have a Geneva Convention. We have a convention on biochemical weapons, okay? We have conventions on CFC gases for climate change, okay? So we will shape bioengineering with CRISPR, and we will also shape artificial intelligence, but we will not, and we will shape the fusion of the human with technology, but we will not hold it up. Over time, we will integrate. The question is under what terms and conditions and with what kind of guidance, right?
Yeah, thank you so much, Professor. We are in the end of time. So we want to end this event just to give us some advices like MBAs, how we can prepare to this future artificial intelligence on the job or learning things that will help us to be prepared in the future.
Yeah, so let me expand a little bit on what I said earlier. You need to excel. You need to at least acquire foundational knowledge in data science, AI, you know, all these new, what we call deep tech. Okay, so tech that takes a lot of lead time, that is that changes the foundations of society, that is enabling of everything in society. Okay. Even if you're not technical, even if you're not an engineer, you may not even like technology, or you may be phobic when it comes to math, okay? And that goes for 80+% of humankind, okay? You still have to make an effort to understand these technologies. It doesn't mean you're going to have to excel at them or get A's or become an expert, but you have to know enough about data science, computer science, you know, all these deep tech areas to help shape them and to say, look, I have an informed opinion as to what this is looking like, where it's going, and I think we need to take it into a responsible direction, and one that for you is a good, fruitful career, okay? If you don't understand these technologies and you leave that to others, other people will be making that money and they will have less influence over how it's going to go, okay? More influence, sorry. So that's number one. Number two, make sure you differentiate. Be good with people. That's where the machine can't go. And I know this is easier said than done because there are many human beings who are not great with other people. Okay, I mean, nobody's perfect. I'm not. You're not. You know, that's why we need coaching and help each other and have empathy. But there are some people who are really just not. I mean, how many times have you had a doctor who has bad bedside manners? And you're like, your job should be about people. Why are you behaving like this to me, right? Or a call center employee who doesn't get what you're saying, okay? Well, that's either because they're not very empathetic or because they have the wrong script, and that's because we train them like a computer, okay, to deal with a human, right? So those are things you should definitely do. Those two go together. The tech quotient and the emotional social quotient go together. Increasingly, companies are hiring ethicists, governance experts to make sure they shape technology solutions in a responsible way. Make sure that whenever you design a business case, a use case, a product, an application, be human-centric. Force yourself to design this in a human-centric way. And I promise you, even though if your bosses may not be asking for it, at some point, somebody that you come across will ask for it. And if you didn't think about this, they will embarrass you publicly. Okay, so be proactive. Okay, even if your bosses aren't asking, have it in your back pocket in case something comes up. Okay, and never lose sight of it. So those are the pieces of advice I would give you. Keep an eye on your humanity. Okay, that's what connects all of us. Okay. We're not here, look, money is a nice thing and we all want to make good money, but money should never, ever, ever be in the forefront of your mind. It's an empty existence. At the forefront of your mind is, how do I make life better for people around me? And if I do it well, people will give me lots of money as a reward. But keep that human being in the center of everything. That to me is the main thing.
We can end better than this. Thank you so much for inspiring us today. Tom, I give you the word if you want to say something.
Just to thank you, Professor Groth, for a fascinating conversation, for sharing your insights with all of us. Thank you to everybody who joined us, and looking forward to the next steps. Thank you so much.
All right. Thanks, everybody, for having me. This was a great conversation.
Thank you so much.
We'll see you soon. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.